Rob, and welcome back to Axel's Garage. We're out here with Jeff. This is our 2005 Chevy Avalanche that we've done a ton of work to, made a ton of videos on it. We've got a whole playlist. I'll link it up here if I can. And we started experiencing an extended crank situation after we got the engine back in it and got it running again. Now, we don't know if this extended crank thing, we don't remember when we bought it, if it had any kind of issue with an extended crank. And what I mean by that is you get in it, you turn the key, go to start it, and it'll crank for, 5 or 6 or 8 seconds, and it's not starting. And then you turn the key off, turn the key back on, reprime it again, and it fires right up, which usually indicates fuel pressure regulator that it's not holding its prime. And right away we thought it was a fuel pressure regulator. Well, in 2005 on these, there is no fuel pressure regulator on the rail like in a lot of the GMT-800 vehicles, Silverados, Suburbans, Tahoe, Yukon, Escalade, all those, the pickups, everything. In 2005, they kind of went to this, 2004, mid-year somewhere, they went to the fuel pressure regulator. It's in the fuel pump assembly in the fuel tank. So in order to change the regulator or troubleshoot the regulator, you can't. You've got to change the whole assembly. So no fuel pressure regulator. We didn't really troubleshoot it well, but we figured it's got 240,000 miles on it. We redid everything for my son for him to use this. So we're like, you know what? We're probably going to go safe anyway and replace the fuel pump assembly, which is the pump, the pickup, the screen. The fuel filter is actually part of that as well, and the fuel pressure regulator. It's all in one unit. We got a Delphi branded unit because we felt that was, a quality unit, not a, Chinese aftermarket. It's probably a Chinese Delphi. I don't know. Anyway, we put that in and there was no change. Now, as a dad, I'm glad he's got a new fuel pump at least that's working. Not like the old fuel pump didn't work, but the top of the fuel pump was very rusted. The lines actually snapped off. We did a video on replacing the pump. But the extended crank didn't go away. So we continued to do some troubleshooting, and we started looking at the EVAP system, and we did have a EVAP purge valve that was sticking partially open, but it wasn't a full, like when I tested it, I expected to get a big suction or vacuum leak when I pulled the EVAP line off, and I didn't really. There was a little bit of a suction, so it was stuck partially. It wasn't closing completely. Changed the part because the part needed to be changed, but that was not our problem. That wasn't causing our extended crank, although a fully stuck open purge valve can cause an extended crank time. Now, when we get in the vehicle, we do cycle the key. If we cycle the key a couple times and let that pump do its prime a couple times, the thing fires right up. What I have noticed is, well, let me back up. Humor me a little bit. So I had an appointment at my local shop to do some AC work that was beyond my capability. There was a clog in the orifice. He had a bad high pressure line. They wound up replacing that with the orifice and charged the AC and everything's working good. But I said, while you're there, just see what you think about this. And they called me up and they said, did you put just a fuel pump in this? You put the whole assembly? I said, I put the whole assembly in. It was a new unit. It was a Delphi branded, which is usually, it's one of the GM OEM brands. I said I didn't cheap out. Put it in. It went in good. Went in right. Everything seemed to be okay. He goes, because I think it's a fuel pump. I think you got a bad pump with a bad check valve or a bad regulator or whatever it might be. I think the fuel pump is allowing it to lose its prime. I said, you sure it's not a leaky injector maybe? Because I have no way of doing like a balance test on the injectors with my do-it-yourself tools. And he said, no. He goes, you would have a miss, you would have a check engine light. Something else would be going on if it was a leaky injector. Now, did they check the injectors? I don't know. But they said, we're 100% sure fuel pump. So I started the return process on the fuel pump that's in it. I ordered another pump to get that in, and now it's the weekend, and I'm about to change the pump. But I said, you know what? Something just doesn't feel right. And the other day, 2 days ago, I get in the truck, I go to start it up, and again, the extended crank. The weird thing is, every once in a while, you'll get a couple of real good starts out of it. It'll start like nothing's going on. And then you'll have the extended crank for 10 or 15 starts in a row, and all of a sudden you'll get 3 or 4 starts, and it's nothing. So I'm paying more attention to that as I'm driving it every day. And what I did notice though is it felt like it was running a little rough until it warmed up a little bit. So you'd get the extended crank, you'd prime it a couple times, get it started up, and I felt a roughness in it. We didn't have any check engine lights or anything, so he wasn't throwing a miss code, but it felt like it was a little rough. And then it would clear up and the thing would run like a top. And then all of a sudden we got a check engine light. So I run the code on the check engine light, and it's a misfire code. It's a P0300, so it's a random misfire. And I'm like, could one be related? And I'm like, but why would it be sporadic? Why would it be a sporadic problem? You know, sometimes it starts right up, sometimes it doesn't. And what my brain was doing was saying, if I have a leaky injector, just one, and that injector is leaky, depending on where the engine shuts down in the 4 cycles of that cylinder where the leaky injector is, maybe it makes a difference or it doesn't make a difference when you start it back up. So if the piston is in a certain spot in its cycle, maybe that leaky injector is not affecting how fast the engine starts up, and maybe when it's in other spots, it has an effect. And so now I'm thinking to myself, how can I, with do-it-yourself tools, isolate whether it's an injector or it's leaking back into the tank through the pump, and the pump's not allowing it to hold the pressure. So what I did was, I put my fuel pressure gauge on the rail. So I got my fuel pressure gauge on the rail, and I prime it. I turn the key on and let the pump prime, and I got 50 PSI on the prime. Then I started up and ran it. And running, I had 58 PSI. Now the spec, I'm not really concerned with what the spec is. I'm concerned with where the fuel pressure is going. So it's running, it's 58. I turn it off, and it goes to 52. And I started a stopwatch. And 10 minutes in, I'll show you where I was at. 41 PSI, 10 minutes in. And now I'm down to, looks like 35 PSI. And let me see on my phone. I'm 22 minutes in, 22:30 in, and I'm at 35 PSI. So my fuel pressure is going somewhere. Now, from everything I've watched on YouTube, from every mechanic I've spoken to, they say that these systems will bleed down a little bit, but it should hold its turn-off pressure for about 20 minutes before it starts bleeding down. And I'm 22 minutes in, or whichever, and I'm 15, 16, 17 PSI in 22 minutes. So my fuel is definitely going somewhere. The fuel pressure gauge is not leaking. There's no smell of fuel here. There's no smell of fuel by the tank, so I don't have a physical leak. It's not leaking outside. I'm losing the pressure either in the tank or in the intake or the combustion chamber. The fuel pressure is going somewhere, and we're trying to figure out where it's going. So I'm going to let this go about a half hour and see where it is. And then the only other thing I could think of to isolate where that fuel is going would be right back there. So right there is my fuel line that comes into the fuel rail on the intake. And there's a small section, it looks like a nylon braided sheath, so there's a section of rubber hose there that's got a looks like a nylon braiding on it, and to protect it. And that little 6 or 8 inch section of rubber hose goes into a steel line, which eventually goes into one of those plastic lines, which eventually goes into the tank. And that's the feed. There's no return on this system. And that's the fuel feed. So what I was thinking to isolate is, let's see what our 30-minute bleed down is with the system as it normally would be. And then we know we have a bleed down on the system. And then if I pinch off that rubber line, I put a clamp on that rubber line after I prime it. So I prime it, it's going to go up to 50 or 52, clamp down on that rubber line while I have 50 or 52, and then watch it for the same amount of time. If it bleeds down, it can't be bleeding back to the pump. It's got to be bleeding through the intake or combustion chamber or the fuel injectors. If it holds, then I know the fuel injectors are holding and there's no leak up here, and the leak has got to be on the backside of it. And I think that's what we're going to do. All right, 30 minutes in, and I am at 30 psi, which means I dropped 22 pounds in 30 minutes. So, like I said, the extended crank or hard start, however you want to put it, I'll say extended crank, is a sporadic problem. Sometimes it starts right up, sometimes it doesn't. So what I'm going to do now is I'll put you guys on the gauge, and I'm going to try to start it normally. I'm not going to, extra prime it or anything. I'm just going to get in, turn the key, try to start it. This thing was running 30 minutes ago. All right, shut it off. All right, so you just heard, I had it running, it's idling, it's at 58. I clamped the fuel line down, that little rubber section, and she shut it off. So hopefully that clamp is good enough where it's not letting anything back towards the tank. And now we can watch that gauge, and I'm going to reset the timer, and we're going to start it, and we're going to see 52 psi if we lose anything. Now, I'm not 100% sure there's nothing making it through there. I might try it a couple times just so I have, I'm certain that nothing is escaping from the fuel line feed back towards the tank, so that I could confirm that the problem's up at this end, not up at that end. So I got my timer set. Check in back with you in a few minutes. So now I'm 10 minutes in. The last time 10 minutes in, I was down to 41. Now I'm down to 46. So it's slower, but that's inconclusive. So let me take this clamp off and see if it speeds up. Look at that. I took the clamp off and it dropped to 41. So that tells me it's in the pump. Not the injector. Because as soon as I took that clamp off, it dropped to 41. Which is where it was the last time, 10 minutes in. It's the pump. Looks like I'm doing a pump again today. So that's my thought, right? It definitely slowed down a lot. Now, who knows if that clamp was clamping it off completely, because it did lose a little bit of pressure, but it wasn't nearly the same pressure 10 minutes in that it was without the clamp on it. And then I took the clamp off and it immediately went down to the 10-minute pressure that it did on the first test. So I'm calling that pretty conclusive that it's going back, it's in the pump. Because as soon as I loosened that up, that pressure disappeared, and now I'm at 41 where I was in the other one. So we're going to throw a pump in this, and hopefully I'll have enough light where I'll remember after I get the pump done. But I'm going to put a pump in it and let you know what the end results were. Do I have another bad pump? Could be. New in a box? Second one in a row? Yeah, it could be. But we're going to throw the pump in and we're going to see. Well, a couple hours later, it's getting dark. By myself, on my back in the driveway. Put another fuel pump in. And I'm still losing pressure. After an hour, I'm down to 40 from 52 psi. Starts and runs just the same. Problem not fixed. I followed the fuel line from the rail all the way back, and yeah, it's got some surface rust on it, but there's no place where it's even sweating any fuel. There is no smell of fuel. The fuel line in these, they go down from the fuel rail, they go down into a little Huzmawatzi that's got an electric plug on it. It goes in and out of that, and that's the sensor for the alcohol content. So, and then it goes from there to the fuel tank, and there's another one fitting when it turns into that plastic line. I check those fittings. It's not wet. I lube that quick connect fitting up a little bit. There's no smell of fuel. There's no wetness of fuel anywhere. It's completely sealed up all the way back into the tank. Another pump, and I'm still losing pressure. So I'm saying it's got to be going. The pressure's got to be going into the from an injector. So I don't know. I'm gonna go back to my local guy where the truck was getting the AC work done and say, hey guys, you diagnosed wrong. Help me. And you could help me down in the comments below. What do you think is going on here? I'm losing pressure and I just can't find it. Got to be injectors. I don't know. I'm frustrated. It's getting dark. I'm putting this thing back in its parking spot. Have a good night, and thanks for watching.